blind. I always want to come, but it just worked out. So glad to be here.
Yay. Nice to see you.
Oh, welcome. Nice to see you, Erin.
You too.
Hi, Victor from the car. You can just maybe wait a few, should we wait a few minutes? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the colors behind you, Erin.
Thank you. We just had a birthday party, so there's lots of
Lots of balloons.
still.
Oh, beautiful. Lovely.
If you're able to and you're not driving, feel free to drop in the chat, just your name and where you're located from, although your name is there, but where you're connecting from if you're comfortable doing that. It's nice to know where people are.
I can just, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna put me here.
Oh, you're in Australia. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from Brazil, but in Australia. Really inconvenient for sessions like these. Most of them are not in very good times for me, but this is the right. Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you.
Great to be here, Tracy and Adriana and everybody.
Hey, Lisa.
Looking forward.
Me too. Oh, Victor, is that a beagle? I love beagles.
Yeah, this is my very good girl, Bailey.
What's her name?
Bailey.
Baby. Hi, baby. Oh, she's sweet.
Bailey.
Oh, okay.
Waiting maybe one more minute. People still seem to be coming in, and then Lisa,
fine.
if you can just drop in the chat where you're speaking from, so just having a little bit of an idea where people are speaking from. Nice, California, Miami, Wisconsin, Lake Superior, Australia, Toronto. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. I'm feeling that we could start, and then whoever joins, if people join, we can just, yeah. All right. So I'm really excited about this session. So first, hi everyone. Hi, nice to see you. And I was just sharing with Tracy a few minutes before we joined the call that I'm hyper excited for this session because it just feels really like I would say novel for me to play in this way, to bring something, do a collaboration in which I'm basically not doing much at all. I'm just, people that don't know me will not know what that means, but if you join C-Lab, you're gonna see a lot of me speaking, and I'm so happy to not be doing this in this session and just go like, yay, this is like Tracy shining her light and doing the amazing things that she does. And so Tracy's a storyteller, and I was introduced to her I don't know, maybe more than a couple of years ago, maybe. And by a mutual liminal friend called Rachel Hayden, that has become a friend and collaborator of mine and super close to Tracy. So Tracy and I have like journeyed last year, a whole year in an experimental women's journey that I put together. So she was supporting the development of my work, and she's written this book, and she's a storyteller, and I've always wanted to first just be being in relationship to her work and just listen to her and just be with her. So that's one my selfish side of in a way creating this so I can be exposed to it fully. But in another way, I've been reading her book, and it's amazing, and it's just really beautiful. And I feel that Tracy brings what I point to, like the feminine. There's lots of words that I point to that she doesn't point to. She does. She role models, she models, and she is, and she weaves with tremendous beauty, and there is elegance in her words, and there's just like a sensibility. She displays a sensibility that feels rare in the world. I think it's not that it's rare. I have friends like that, but they're not in the limelight, or they're usually not in the political economic system. They're not populating our systems. And a part of my piece is that this is a mistake. We need to have this interpenetration of art and poetry and storytelling, and the feminine comes in oral tradition. So by the oral tradition being forgotten, we have a history that's very dry and biased and at times boring and mistaken. And if we can perpetuate the mistaken, if we keep perpetuating what history forgets, then we have a very skewed reality. And part of like really highlighting Trace's work is part of this course correction that I'm attempting to also do with C-Lab, which is remembering the bits that we have forgotten. And there are many bits, and I feel that Tracy has an important piece that she's holding. So I'm here just going, yes, beautiful. So I'm here just excited to put Tracy and her art in the center of this session. So thank you, Tracy, for accepting the invitation and being here and to share your gifts.
Thank you, Adriana. Yeah, it's so sweet to have been connecting on a very regular basis, once a month, with Adriana and a number of other women. We've cycled together for a whole year and working and partaking of the feast that Adriana offers through her work with C-Lab, and the presencing of our role, our reality as cyclical beings. Again, what we've forgotten yet is so interwoven into who we are. And when we can remember that consciously, it just changes the landscape of what's possible. And boy, oh boy, do we need a landscape change on a couple fronts right now. So super grateful. Yeah, welcome. If you're just joining us, feel free to drop where you're joining from. It's nice to just see all of us on the map, from Australia to El Salvador to Wisconsin, and many places beyond. It's pretty exciting. Thanks for showing up. So how I want to begin is how I always begin, whether I'm offering some kind of a performance-based experience in person, or whether we're working virtually one-to-one or in a group as a circle. I want to ask us to just drop into our bodies, because everything
Sorry, Tracy. I just tried to mute other people and muted you together. How do I, can you unmute yourself? No, just a second. Everybody is a little bit of a glitch more. Ask to unmute. Yeah,
There
can you
we go.
unmute
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Sweet, how perfect, how
Great.
perfect. Already these energies of rupture are showing up in these glitches and taking us into really where I want to bring us, which is the liminal. And I mean, we're already there, but presencing that. And what takes us into the liminal is the unknown. But for now, as I was saying, I'm not sure when I was muted, we're just going to come into the body. So the invitation is to let the eyes close or the lids lower and just let your hands rest somewhere on your body, your lap, your heart, your belly, your thighs. Just let them rest and notice what your hands are touching. Is it skin? Is it fabric? Is it air? Notice the taste in your mouth. Notice what you see on the inside of your eyelids, because your eyes are still seeing. Notice any aromas in the space that you're in. Notice any sounds that you hear in your body or in the space that you're in. And then just notice how the breath is breathing you. This always automatic experience from that first breath, that first lungful, till the last one, which is inevitable. See if you can sense the breath coming in through the nose or the mouth. See if you can track it as it comes in. Can you feel it in the mouth, in your trachea? Can you feel other parts of your body being filled and emptied? Notice. And then when you're ready, you can just slowly let the gaze, let the lids open, your eyelids open, and just avoid looking at the screen straight away. Looking down on the floor, the table, the wall, anywhere that's just not the screen at first. Taking in the color, shapes. And then even if your video's off, the invitation is just let your gaze come to the screen and let's just gaze at one another. Even if we're seeing someone's name on the screen, this is a way to just connect in this incredibly bizarre virtual way, as if we were gathered around fire, just meeting one another. Hey, so thank you. Here we are. So the invitation is to stay in your body throughout our experience, and whatever that might mean for you, staying connected to the sensation of the hands, your bum seated in whatever it's sitting in. It seems pretty fundamental, but when we're on the computer, we can just become these heads. So staying in the body, feel free to move and wiggle and stretch, yawn, all the good things that the body does. So I'm just going to preface, we're going to go give you a little overview. I'm going to just drop in some words. These words are like seeds that will have some meaning connected to them. And maybe that meaning will be shared, maybe it will be quite different. And we're not going to spend a lot of time with that, but these words are energies that are going to inform our experience for the next hour or so. And then I'm going to invite you to write, whether that's down on a piece of paper or whether, and then I'm going to invite you to drop it into the chat. It'll be short, it'll be a short sentence or 6 or 7 words, something like that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about story and storytelling and what that is and what that means to me. This is my 29th year as a storyteller, as someone who said, right, I'm going to be this person that shares stories orally. So I'm hardwired in a way that one is after 30 years soaking in oral tradition to relate in through the language of orality, which is a different language than what most of us are hardwired to as readers from left to right, of writers, right? So we're going to get into a little bit of that. Then we're going to drop into some story, traditional story, and somehow it'll weave with a personal narrative. And I'm not sure how that will roll yet. We're going to offer libations to the story, and I'll share more about that. And then another prompt as kind of a closing. And then after that, we'll share the prompt in the chat, and then we'll have a little debrief. Adriana and I will talk, some questions, and kind of just see where it takes us before we say good evening, or in Adriana's case, good morning, and onwards into her day we'll go. So that's kind of the plan. It might change. And so these words, cycles, the cycle of glaciers, the cycle of the formation of basalt, the cycle of weather, the cycle of a woman's womb, the cycle of a seed, of an oak tree that's 100 years old. We are cyclical beings, and women have this incredible ability to hold life, to create life with a little help. And this is a powerful thing. And gents, you are not left out of the room by any means, because you cycle, we all cycle. And when we become present to the cycles all around us, within us, our bodies, birth, death, all of it, it's robust and it's meaningful. And I find an incredible antidote to just living in modernity and trying to find our way in this world, which involves really interesting relationship to livelihood and consuming and a whole host of other things. So being cyclical, being in cycle, stories are cyclical. And stories have been told, some of these stories, fairy tales, mythologies have been told for thousands and thousands of years. They say that the first stories were told around fires in Africa. And 20,000 years ago, just, can you even wrap your head around that? So before the printing press, before something was etched as a ruin into a bit of ash or into a tablet of sandstone, orality was the way, and it cultured a consciousness, and much has been forgotten. Stories are animate. They're living beings. They're alive. The story that I'm going to share with you, that we will be co-creating, because your listening and your imagination will create this co-creative relationship. The storyteller needs a listener, and the listener needs a teller. I just want you to know that you're not going to have to do anything except listen with your whole body. Listen actively. Now, don't get me started on our lack of ability often to listen actively. We're bombarded often by so many sensory experiences, just auditorily. So listening actively. And when you notice your mind's wandered off to whatever, dinner waiting or the hot date this weekend or whatever, just bring it back to this active listening. That might be really easy, and it might be the hardest thing you do today. So hence, this is co-creative. I need you to be in the room listening actively. It will create an experience that is more than the sum of our parts, okay? That's my experience. And you're gonna listen, you're gonna imagine actively. If you allow your imagination to just be in the story. Stories are a series of images. They are not a series of written words, not stories told anyways. Okay. And then we come to the delicious part of this whole reason, this whole premise of rupture and regeneration. These are essential aspects to any cycle. There's a rupture, whether it's an egg rupturing from a fallopian tube or a child fucking rupturing, right? From the croft of a woman's hips. That's a rupture. And yeah, rupture of loss, rupture of the unplanned journey, rupture of a thunderstorm. And then regeneration. Some would say that we're in a time of apocalypse. And the Greek word for apocalypse is apocalypsis. And it means a thin place. It actually means or holds the meaning for birth, for regeneration in it. Okay. And regeneration, this is how things are born. It's not new news to anyone. And yet the presencing of that is what I'm hoping to really help us become conscious of, the relationship between rupture and regeneration. So that's where we're going to dip in right now. I just want you to take a moment before you write to reflect, and welcome Helen, to reflect on a personal rupture. Now, this doesn't mean it might not be global, but you have a personal, it feels personal, right? And again, it can be strictly you in your life, and it can be something larger than you in your life, but it still affects you personally, a rupture. And reflect on it, and then write either a 6-word story, and nobody's counting, so it can be 7 or 8, or just a short sentence that that speaks to this rupture. It's not the story of the rupture, just, bare bones. You're giving us the bare bones, okay? And again, this isn't about getting into the story of the rupture. It can be something like, my dad is dead, or I lost my dog, or, just something short and sweet, but we get the nugget of the rupture, okay? When you're ready, write it down. And then when you have it, drop it into the chat, and we'll wait for everyone. So we're all in this together. A prompt about a rupture personal to you. In 6 words or a short sentence. I will start. I'll drop something in. Mm, mhm, mhm, mhm. Mm, mm, mm. Mm, mm. So after you've dropped something into the chat, let's just, take a look, check it out. These are ruptures, and you might not, know the full story, but they're something that felt like a rupture. Mm. Okay. So, yeah, thanks, Lisa. Mm. A rupture can feel like a loss. It can disorient. It can mess with our sense of identity big time. Thank you. So we're gonna move into this. I've spoken a little bit about orality and literacy, and I'm not anti-writing. I wrote a book, and I love the written word. And I think the world would be, thanks, Alex. Mm, mm. I think the world, the balance of our speech and tracking information that's spoken orally in this non-linear way, in this way that can jump to the past and speak about the present and future trip out into the future, this non-linear way of orality. Stories are a bridge. And what could be more liminal than a story, a bridge between the teller and the listener, between another viewpoint, between differing viewpoints, between countries and cultures. And yeah, this story that I am going to share is a fairy tale, and it's in the Brothers Grimm collection. And it's a story that, has been told thousands and millions of times. And the story known today may be very different than the original seed story. Mythologist and Jungian Louise von France considers fairy tales to be the anatomy of our psychology. The anatomy of our psychology. And fairy tales and myths usually have no author. They are unauthored. They belong to themselves in a certain way. They belong to everyone in that way. And it's a story that you would certainly not tell your children. It's one of those fairy tales. But you could if they were ready and they were old enough and they were practiced in mythos, looking at the world through a mythological lens, which, believe it or not, children are. It's usually adults that get in the way with all the logos and the ethos of story. And it's a story that can easily be bypassed, but I think it holds, it's like a blueprint for exploring this dance of rupture and regeneration. And somehow it's meaningful to me as somebody who lives with post-traumatic stress, as somebody who's had multiple like major ruptures in my life, that it's not important to get into those, but just know that that's in me. these stories offer a solace. And in particular, last summer, I had a unexpected hysterectomy, and they sliced down the center of my abdomen from the belly button down to my pubic bone, and they pulled out a large mass, and they pulled out my womb. And it's been such an interesting journey from the whole, like, oh shit, you've got something living in you that's not supposed to be there. Is it cancer? Is it not? We won't know until we open you up. And then we're going to take it all out regardless. And it wasn't cancerous, but they didn't know that until they actually were in the surgery. So when I woke up from that, you know, thank goodness it wasn't cancer, dodged that bullet for now. But I'm exploring what it's like to be a woman without a womb, a woman who has conceived twice, but never given birth. And that minus wombness of my reality right now, like this major organ, is no longer in me. And it's an incredibly regenerative process. And I don't even know, like 5 years from now, I'll likely have more language and more understanding. So I'm just offering that as this personal journey that I think this story, not necessarily in a linear way or in a logical way, relates with. All right. So while I'm telling, feel free to stay with video on, feel free to turn it off. It's lovely to have eyeballs, but not necessary. Again, we're co-creating. So the invitation is to stay in your body. When the story reminds you of another story, just come back. No big deal. Just come back. And yeah. So this is a story that is pretty much told in dozens of cultures around the world. And this particular version comes from the Brothers Grimm collection. It's called The Handless Maiden. And once upon a time, there was a forest, an ancient forest, a forest before all the axes fell. A forest that you could get lost in, that you could die in. It was wild, it was unpredictable, it was liminal. And through the forest, in all directions, you would come to a field. And in this particular story, we're coming to a field of wheat next to a rushing river, a river that's flowed from some mountain and makes its way through the forest, through these fields. And alongside this river is a homestead, and alongside this river is a mill. And the mill is broke. The wheat in the fields sits unharvested, unthreshed. It will not be milled into flour. There will be no bread. The miller and his family, his wife and his daughter, are in hard times. The mill is broke. Their once fine clothing is now threadbare. Their once plump cheeks and soft, rounded bellies are now sallow and hungry. The miller cannot provide for his family. What he can do is he can go in the woods and gather wood. He can chop wood. He can heat the hearth, even if there's nothing to cook on it. So this one day out he goes into the forest with his silver tipped axe. His eyes are downcast. His heart is ironclad. He gathers. He gathers the windfalls. And he has a pile of thin twigs and larger branches, and then he's ready to chop. This feels like magic in his body to chop wood. He's rich in wood. After being in the forest and gathering and chopping for hours, he looks up a little higher and he notices a plume of smoke coming from behind an old oak tree. And he steps closer, and then someone steps out from behind the oak tree. An old man with a crooked smile. The old man rubs his jaw and he looks at the miller from his feet to his head and meets his eyes, and he says, "My friend, you have fallen on hard times. Well, today might be a good day for you then, because I can change your luck." And the miller was not really sure what he was talking about, but he came closer. And the old man with the crooked smile, he said, "Yes, that's right, my friend. I can get you back in good graces with the river of what is abundance, life." And the miller said, "What do you want?" Well, he said, "What I want is what's behind your house. That's all." Just what's behind your house? The miller thought back to what was behind their house, and there was nothing. There was a courtyard and full of weeds and an old ancient apple tree. It barely gave any apples. "And if I give you what's behind my house, then," said the old man, you will have enough. You will have plenty. The mill will run again." Well, the miller said, "That sounds like an agreeable situation. I consent. You can have what's behind my house." And the old man said, "Very well, I will come. I will come in 3 years' time. Tend to what you have promised me." And then the old man with the crooked smile, he blinked 3 times. And when the miller looked down at his feet, his old worn shoes were now, they were integrous. The soles were thick and sturdy. His threadbare clothes was now that of a well-to-do merchant, as he had been. And incredulous, he just looked at his fabric, the ache, the gnaw in his belly, so hungry had he been, was gone. And when he looked up, so was the old man. Well, he forgot about the twigs and the branches and even the silver-tipped axe he would come back for later. He went running, stumbling out of the woods. And as he ran towards their home, his wife was coming out of the house. "Husband, husband." He hadn't heard her voice sound so sweet and melodious for years. And he saw that she was wearing a beautiful gown, and her cheeks had roses in them. "Husband, husband, what has happened? The cupboards are full." What has happened?" And the miller said, my dear, our fortunes have changed. I met a man." "What man?" "I met a man." "What man?" said the wife. "I met a man and I promised him just what's behind the house. You know, just what's behind the house. You know, that apple tree, right?" And he watched the color drain from his wife's face. She said, "Husband, husband, what have you done? This whole time that you've been in the forest, hasn't our own daughter, our own lovely daughter, been out sweeping the courtyard behind the house?" And the color drained from his face. No, it couldn't be. Well, they had 3 years to find out, and they dare not let their daughter marry in case the old man came back looking for what the miller had promised. And 3 years passed, and eventually they did tell their daughter what they could. And the mother taught the daughter ways to protect herself. And 3 years passed, and they knew that the next day was the day that would be the 3-year anniversary. And she wore a gown of white, and she had scrubbed her hands and her face, and she had traced a chalk circle around her body, as her mother had taught her to do, to protect herself. She wasn't sure what she was protecting herself from. Well, it was noon. The sun was high in the sky. The breeze stirred the white pines. And then the breeze dropped. And they heard him coming through the forest, branches breaking, and then he was there, loping out of the forest. This old man with this crooked smile. His eyes were glassy and full of some feverish delight, and he clapped his hands together and he said, "Hello, friends. It is I, it is I. Ah, I see, I see. Yes, yes, it is your daughter I have come for. This is what we promised. I see you prosper. The mill is running. Your bellies are round." And he goes, "I won't keep you, but I will take what you've promised me now." And the girl watched, her eyes wide, and she began to weep. And she wept. And the old man leaned in to grab her by the arm, take her hand. But something prevented him, and he was sort of shot back. And he tried again to take the girl, but he was shot back. And he again tried one more time, but no, he couldn't get close enough to touch her. Something was preventing him. He would just fall back. And he was frustrated. He was angry. He said, "She is too clean. I will come back in 7 days." Do not let her wash anything. And he stomped off into the forest. And so for 7 days, the girl did not wash. And as before, this time she used small pebbles to make a circle, little white pebbles to make a circle around her body, her filthy body. Her hair hung lank dirt all over her face and her arms, you know. And yeah, 7 days later, out through the forest he came, loping towards her, his eyes glittering with his prospects. And he said, fine, this will be fine. And he came closer. He goes, you know, I'm here, so there's nothing else to say. I'm just going to take your daughter away. And again, he reached, he lunged in, and again was thrown back further, more, even violently than before. And again, he tried and he tried and he tried, but he could not touch the girl. He was furious and he said, I will come back. Now you must cut her hands off. As he was trying to reach for her, she was weeping and weeping, and her tears had just smeared and cleaned her hands off. She'd been crying so much. Her tears cleaned her hands. And he said, you must cut her hands off. She's too clean. Well, the miller said, cut my daughter's hands off? What are you, crazy? The old man said, no, I'll be back. And if it's not her, it will be you. Well, we can't imagine the conversation in that room, in their house for 3 days. And they didn't wait 3 days. In fact, the story goes, the daughter said, Father, there is no other choice. You must cut off my hands. And after great weeping and wailing by everyone, that's what he did. The axe was sharp. They bound her stumps, and they kept the hands. 3 days later, the old man with the crooked smile turned up. And the mother had a bit of flour, and with the flour, she made a circle around her daughter. Her daughter was too weary. And the old man was certain this time he would take her away. But he did not. Because as he reached and grabbed for her body, he was thrown back again and again. He cursed. He stomped his feet. He threw his hat down. He spit. But he could not take her. And eventually, he left. But he warned them, just you wait. Well, that night, the mother insisted, my dear, now you're saved from him. We'll take care of you the rest of your life. You'll want for nothing. But she said, no, I would rather live my life as a beggar than stay with you. And so she asked them to tie her hands around her back and to re-bandage her stumps. And they did. And everyone wept. And then she left. And she went into the forest she'd known all of her life. And for 7 days and 7 nights, she ascended and descended. She ascended and descended. And eventually she came to the edge of the forest. In twilight, that time of the day where it's not quite day and it's not quite night. The gloaming. And she could see there a fortress of some sort, a castle, a structure. And there in the grounds of the castle, she could see what must be an orchard, and she could smell the fruit. She was so hungry. So she walked out into the clearing. She walked towards the orchard, which was protected by a moat. She could not cross that water. She had no hands to drain it. And she got to her knees and she wept. She wept and she beseeched the moon and the stars, the dirty water of the moat, the pears hanging ripe and ready on the tree. Now, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something. She had to blink a few times. It was a spirit of some sort. And it was going towards the wheel that kept the water in the moat. And the spirit opened the wheel and the water poured out of the moat, allowing the girl to cross into the orchard. In the orchard, she couldn't reach any of the fruit. They just dangled right without hands. She couldn't grab them. She couldn't pull a pear to her mouth. And again, a prayer, an offering of her tears. And one of the pear trees, one of the branches bowed just enough for a pear to come down close enough for her to eat. And she ate just one pear. One was enough as the sweet juice ran down her chin, that fruit in her mouth. Now, by this time, the salting of stars had come out in the night sky. And she was unaware, but there were 2 eyes watching from the side of some outbuilding. The gardener had been clearing up for the day, at the end of the day, and he had seen the girl, had seen the spirit, had watched the moat drain and watched the pear branch bow to feed her a pear. He couldn't believe it. What mischief, what magic is this? And he watched the girl leave the orchard and go back into the forest. He would have to tell the king in the morning, because the king, he counted those pears. If there was one missing, it would be his ass that would be in trouble. And that's what he did in the morning. He told the king, and the king was skeptical. He said, well, we'll see. We'll see tonight. Maybe she'll be back. I don't really believe you, dude, but we'll find out. We'll just see. And the girl, she had slept in the forest, and she came back out at the end of the day, just as before. She offered her prayers, her tears down into the earth, and the spirit drained the moat again. And as before, she begged, pleaded, prayed, asked, and received a pair that bowed right to her mouth. And this time the king and the gardener and the king's wise man, magician, holy dude were watching. And the king elbowed the gardener, go and talk to her. The gardener elbowed the magician and said, go and talk to her. This is your domain. This is beyond our ken. Go find out what's going on here. So the magician, he walked into the orchard and he came up quietly behind her. He didn't want to startle her. He wasn't sure what she was, and he leaned in quietly while she was just lost in thought, still chewing the pear that filled her mouth. And he said, are you of this world or not of this world? And she thought for a moment, and then she said, I was of this world, but I am no longer of this world. And then he leaned in and he said, are you human or are you spirit? And she thought for a moment, and then she said, I am both. And by now the king was curious and he came forward. And he had questions. And she had a story. And the story tumbled from her lips and they all listened. And he said, well, you may rest here if you wish. Surely a mattress would be more comfortable than the forest floor. She considered this and agreed. And the next day, the king had silver hands made for her. Silver, hands of silver that were put on her stumps. And it was something. And time passed and autumn grew into winter. And that winter, we could just say that the king and the girl fell in love. And they were wed. And it was sweet. When love comes, it's sweet. And soon the queen with the silver hands, her belly grew round with child. And also that lived in the castle was the king's mother. And she was a kind woman and had took kindly to her daughter-in-law. They had a bond. And while the queen was pregnant, there was some war in some far-off land that called the king away. Must go to war. Must help my allies. And he said goodbye to his wife, and he said, let me know when the child is born, and I will come and return. And goodbyes were said, and away he rode. Well, another month or two passed, and a child was born, a bonny boy. And oh, it was a good birth. And all the poets of the land created poetry for this sweet prince. And the king's mother sent a note with a messenger to go and tell the king he had a healthy, beautiful baby boy. Surely he would come home now. So the messenger ran, he ran along the river, he ran through the forest, and eventually he was tired, so he stopped to rest along the river. He stopped to rest. He would have rested too. It was a long journey. He had the note tucked in his pocket by his heart. It was safe there. And he fell asleep next to that sweet music of the creek, of the river. And of course, who should show up now, loping out of the forest? The old man with the crooked smile. And he had a note too. And he took the note written by the king's mother and he tucked the new note into the messenger's pocket. And then he vanished. And when the messenger woke up, knowing nothing about this bit of trickery, he carried on and eventually delivered the note to the king. And the note said, my son, your wife has delivered a beast, half dog, half human. What should we do? Come. And immediately the king wrote a note. He wrote a note that said, my dear, I'll be there soon. I'll be there within days. I'll come. Tend to my son, tend to my wife. And he gave that to the messenger. He said, now go fast. And the messenger did. He was fast, but you know, it's a long journey. And he knew this great sweet spot. He could just take a little nap just for an hour. And he did. And he did. And of course, we know who's waiting in the forest, don't we? The old man with the crooked smile was waiting in the forest. And he had another note. And he took the note the king had wrote and he put another note into the messenger's pocket. And he said, it is done. And away he went. The messenger woke, not knowing anything had happened, and he delivered the note back to the castle some hours later. And the note said, kill the queen and save her heart. Wow, the king's mother couldn't believe what she was reading. This wasn't her son. She would do no such thing. Kill the queen? What? But just to make sure, she did send the huntsman into the forest to kill the doe and bring the heart to her. And then she said to her daughter-in-law, to the queen, you must go, my dear, it is not safe. So they wrapped the child to her back. And again, she ventured into the forest, this time with silver hands and with a babe on her back. And into the forest she journeyed and she journeyed and she journeyed. She ascended and descended. She ascended and she descended. And eventually there in the heart of the forest, she came to a stone cottage. And outside the cottage was a sign that said, all here dwell free. All here dwell free. All here dwell free. And out from the cottage came a woman dressed in white. She was young. And she guided the queen and the child in. And that is where the queen lived for 7 years. And over the course of 7 years, she got rid of those silver hands. They were uncomfortable. But new hands grew back. First they were small, but then they were hers. Now, back at the castle, shortly after the queen left, of course, the king arrived home, concerned for his wife. And of course, there was some explaining to do. They all sorted it all out. They don't know what happened. The messages were swapped. And he went out looking for her. And for 7 years, he wandered the forest, became a wild thing himself in the forest. And this wild man ended up finding his way to the stone cottage where the sign outside says, "All here dwell free." He was so tired. He had not found his wife. He had not found his child. He was welcomed into the cottage, and he was let to rest, and a white handkerchief was covered over his face. And he slept. Perhaps for the first time in 7 years, he slept. And as he slept, the queen came into the room, and she recognized through the dirt, through the whiskers, the hair, the wild tangle of hair, she recognized her husband. She waited. And when he woke, he saw a woman there standing, holding a child's hand. He did not recognize her because his wife did not have hands. Surely this could not be his wife. But it was. And it was some reunion. For 7 years, they had, should we say, matured into the most robust aspect of themselves. And there were many gifts given to the little cottage in the woods. And then they made their way back through the forest, back to the castle. And of course, their mother was there to welcome them back. And the second wedding was had, a wedding between the mature feminine and the mature masculine. And this would be the wedding. And they say they danced for 7 days and 7 nights. In fact, they still might be dancing and celebrating, toasting. And at somewhere in that celebration, the queen slipped away. In her journey back from the cottage, she still had her silver hands, which she had kept. And she took them out to the orchard where she dug a hole and buried them deep with her blessing. And so they say they lived happily ever after until they didn't. The end. So stay in the story, stay in the story, stay in the story. So just stay in the story, stay with the images. Some images might charm you, some might trouble you. And before we shift, just offering a libation. Those of you that have worked with me before know that these stories are alive, and offering a libation, offering praise to the story just by naming an image, not what the image meant. We're human beings. There will be plenty of time to make meaning because you will be carrying the story now for the rest of your life if you choose to remember it. So offer praise to the story. Just recall an image. And if anyone wants to speak that image out, not what it means to you, not if you liked it or didn't like it, not the story about the image, but just the image. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak that praise. Otherwise, just think it to yourself or speak it to yourself. I will offer praise, the image that charms me every time is the bough of the pear tree bending so that she can reach and eat the pear.
That was also my image.
Anyone else? An image that charms or troubles you?
The white circles of protection, all 3 of them.
hands growing back.
You can speak, Brandon.
Oh, silver tipped axe, silver tipped, silver hand.
Yeah, thank you. So now the story is yours to carry. And as I said, this story has been kind of a guide, an ally as I've navigated my own story of rupture and regeneration in relation to my womb being removed. And over the course of the next few days and weeks, images might come from the story, images that you like or dislike. And if you have time to reflect, to journal, how is this relevant? What part of the story is relevant? How do you relate in your own life? And keep in mind that the story isn't just this linear, logical experience. This is this wild orality of mythos. Okay, so symbols, metaphors. You can even research, what do hands symbolize? What does a pear symbolize? And you'll start to kind of lift the lid on that more literal version of the story. Okay. So yeah, enjoy. Feel free to keep me posted about your journey. You can email me. I'd love to hear feedback of how these stories are moving in people. It's fascinating and it's beautiful in a group when you can share your experiences, because we all have unique experiences with stories. And when we hear other people's experiences, it moves the energy and our relationship to the story. Thanks, Chris, for sharing. Yeah, so feel free to email me if you have any insights or things you want to share about the story and how it moves you, how you relate to the story. And now, before we shift gears, a prompt in closure, reflecting on your own life. Go ahead.
I think sorry, Brandon wanted to speak. Did you want to speak,
Oh,
Brandon?
sorry.
No.
No, go ahead, Brendan. No? Okay. We're going to have time to talk a wee bit too, but before we do, reflect on a regeneration in your life, something that grew, perhaps from a recognizable rupture, but something that grew in your life, something that regenerated. And again, don't need to tell the story. 6 words, a short sentence. Don't overthink it. Yeah. Thanks, Erin. Something that's regenerated. Uh-huh. Beautiful. Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Alex, Brendan. So we've got 15 minutes before we close our time. And we've packed a lot in. And that was intentional to kind of stir the pot up a little bit. For some of you, this might have been a lot. So tend to your bodies as we move in beyond our session today. And we're going to just open it up. Adriana's going to kind of take us into some debriefing and closure.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. That was amazing. I'm actually mostly curious about how it is for people, really, how it was to receive. And I was deep in the story, so to me it was, and I could have stayed, so I don't know how it was. So I'm curious how that is in the body, mind, psyches that we are today. If for some people staying in story for a long time is agitating, for me it was very calming and very easy to not enter narrative, to just be in the kind of gestalt of the experience. And yeah, I was moved to tears in different bits, and was really there was some bits that really will stay with me, like the family, the beginning of the conversation when you're narrating about the you can't imagine those 3 days in that family. I could really feel like the thickness of that, like of the air. Like I could imagine like a family with the hearts heavy. So I'm just with the gestalt. And it's hard for me. I'm noticing that, like, I was relaxing into the space that I was inhabiting, which is harder to shift gears to kind of like wrap it up in some coherent narrative. So, but I'm okay. I'm imagining that with people here, it will be fine for me to not be coherent. So I think it's just maybe to even make it visible what these stories, like what it felt like. I'm now trying to put words into it. It's like was giving my mind, my whole being, a holiday of its linearity or something. So it feels good to be with other things populating. I don't know how to. Sorry, I noticed that people have to keep unmuting. I don't know how to do that. Hold on, unmute themselves. Yeah, is that okay? Is that now working? People can
There,
unmute
it
themselves.
did for me. Did it work try it again. Anyone else? Can you unmute? I see Brendan shaking his head. Aaron, can
Okay,
you unmute?
awesome.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a very interesting contrast to be in right now. Just this, just the unmuting, the muting, just this, and noticing how our world is so populated with things like that require a very particular type of engaging. And I'm like, I was so in a different space, which felt so creative. And now I have to like unmute. Feel so
It's a
narrow.
rupture. It's a rupture.
It's a rupture. All right. So I'll just mute myself and love to open the space to hear others. Yeah, just please unmute and go for it.
I'll just share a reflection. Tracy, I think over the last couple of years, I've attended maybe 6 or 8 of your events, and I just happen to keep coming to the ones where you tell this tale. I have heard this tale several times, at least twice this year. And it's funny because I usually can't really hang on past the beginning. Like I've been getting stuck in that rupture piece. it's almost like when I hear the story, I kind of shut down and I can't hang in till the end. I'm not sure what that's about, but this time I really was mindful that I wanted to catch the end, and also just was able to, for some reason, to really hear all the way. And I'm so really like focusing on that renewal piece in a way that I just haven't been able to before. So I'm really curious about the all here dwell free, like that safe place is really standing out to me this time. Whereas before, I think I really glossed over that. And then the ending piece that is really standing out is how they like remarried as their mature selves, and even the ritual burial of the silver hands, which weren't even hers. You know, I'm just like I'm feeling the layers more, and I finally like got to the end. So and that feels very parallel, honestly. So thank you. And I'm glad I live near you because I want to like continue to work with this story, because it's been a interesting relationship over the years, but it landed very differently today. So
Mhm.
thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, and don't feel you have permission to not speak, to just be in the kind of like, as Adriana said, the gestalt of this experience. And if you can stick in it and don't want to like start talking and what it was like, great. Soak in that as long as you can. And know that you can hear this story 15 more times, and each time another layer might present itself to you. And that's the beauty of these stories, particularly this one. And if, no one's feeling like saying anything, which is great because silence is amazing. And if silence can be awkward, that's even better. And we can just have our closure and whatever feels right for that. I would invite you to offer some kind of libation to the story beyond the praise of an image. If you felt like you wanted to offer the story a beer, or bake a cake, or open a window, or sing a song, or something that puts you in relationship with the story ongoingly. Again, don't overthink it. And yeah, thanks for your beautiful listening. Thank you for co-creating. This is a story that's more than just the father cutting his daughter's hands off. It speaks to more than that. Lisa, you have your hand up. Feel free to unmute, jump in.
Yeah, Tracy, I just want to thank you for such a beautiful session. Oh, I have so much going on for me. I think like Erin, I think I experienced the rupture of this story when I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And I've been in relationship all this time, so I'm remembering,
Mm.
and that's going to take some time.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And gentle ease with your remembering process,
Yeah.
right? And may you
Yeah.
find a place where all dwell free to regenerate.
Right on. Thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, Adriana and everyone. I feel called to share one thing. It's what listening to Erin. I I was just noticing that when somebody speaks about what makes salient for them, then this doorway becomes salient for me, even though it wasn't. So I was just noticing the richness of hearing the shares and how that's something that I would love in the future and some other configuration, because I was like, oh, there's lots of facets of the story that my psyche gets drawn when I listen to you, Aaron. It was amazing hearing how much you could only take in the rupture for a while, and then now the story landed for you completely differently. And something happened for me this week, which was my mom. She went to a retreat, which is beautiful. She's in her journey, and she went to a retreat, and she's doing something that she said that I and other people had mentioned to her 20 years ago, and she remembers it, and she's like, I just couldn't understand. I just couldn't, but now I could. And I was just, there was something so powerful about that in me. It's my own learning of the rhythm that it takes, the pace that it takes for everyone to, all of us and me included, to land whatever piece we're landing in life, and the healing that it takes. And yeah, it was like almost, so when you spoke, Aaron, I was like, oh, my mom maybe was just listening. She was ready now to listen to another part of the story, and it took her 20 years, and it doesn't matter. And so that was beautiful. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm just curious if anybody wants to share a takeaway without any pressure, or the invitation that Tracy just made as well.
Thanks, Jen, too, for sharing in the chat. So as we close, which I think we will, I invite you to just bring your hands together and just feel your fingers touching. Feel your palms connecting, your thumbs touching, and then rub your hands together, and starting nice and slow, and be aware of the friction in between. You can even close your eyes, so you kind of arrest that sense of sight, helping you tune in to what's happening. And then go faster and faster. And your hands should start to warm up. You feel that friction, some heat. And I want you to feel the heat. And then pull the hands apart and notice what's there between them. And scoop up that resonance, that vibration between your hands, cup it in your palms, and bring it to your eyes so that you may see what you are ready to see. Bring your hands to your ears so that you may hear what you are ready to hear. Bring your hands to your throat so we may speak what we are ready to speak. And then bring your hands to your heart so you may feel what you are ready to feel. And then last, all the way down to your belly, right over your belly button, your umbilicus, connecting you with your mother and your mother's mother, so that we may know what we're ready to know, to become more and more of ourselves together. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tracy, so much. And bye.
Bye.
Bye.